Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is still Victor Shi. It is Thursday, January 12th, and across the country and across all levels of government, we're seeing candidates who won their elections getting sworn in. Yesterday, Maryland sworn in its state legislature, and a part of that group is someone named Joe Vogel, who has officially become the youngest member of Maryland's state legislature in history. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Joe Vogel himself to talk about how it feels to be the youngest member of Maryland's state legislature and how he plans to represent Gen Z in Maryland's state legislature now. Joe, it's so great to see you. And first of all, huge congratulations on being sworn in.
Thank you so much, Victor. It really is a pleasure to be here with all of you, and to speak to your audience.
Of course. So there's a lot I want to ask you about, but first I want to ask you how it feels now that you're officially a member of Maryland state legislature.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's been a long journey to get here, and a long campaign and a lot of work. Yesterday was a really exciting day, and I think we're really at a it's a new day for Maryland. We're about to swear in our first Democratic governor in 8 years. We just swore in our new Attorney General. Our new comptroller is being sworn in on Monday. And yesterday, like you mentioned, we all got sworn in as new legislators. A lot of new folks representing a new generation, a new style of politics. It's very exciting. It's a very exciting time right now in Maryland. But I got to tell you, I'm just ready to get to work. And we have a great team here working on some ambitious pieces of legislation to really deliver for Maryland families.
So I want to ask you about all of that later on in the episode, but first, you mentioned the composition of the Maryland state legislature so far, and I'm curious, how have your colleagues been? How has that initial phase been since when you were first elected to now? Have you found anything to be challenging or confusing, or how has that process been like so far?
It's a new job, and with any new job, you need some time to adjust and to figure some things out, right? Even to find where the nearest water cooler is, or where you get your new computer, right? Those are some of those challenges that we've been working on today and yesterday. But really, the work that we're doing here, I think, is similar to the work that I've done over the course of my career, right? It's fighting for gun safety. It's working to stand up for working families. It's addressing issues of mental health in our schools and taking on the climate crisis. So, what I found so far is that there are a lot of colleagues here, folks who've been here for a really long time, who are eager to mentor me and eager to support me as we work on these critical efforts. What I find so exciting about being in this legislature at this moment in time is that I have the opportunity to serve alongside folks who've been here, delegates and senators who've been here in the tough fights, right? I'm sitting just a few seats away from some delegates who were at the center of the fight for marriage equality not too long ago, delegates who were pivotal to helping ban assault weapons in our state, to repeal the death penalty, to pass the largest investment in public schools in our state's history, right? To reform the criminal justice and policing systems. So it is really a profound honor to share this chamber with them.
Oh. So before we get into some of the legislative priorities for this session, I want to take a step back to when you first announced, because I think politics is difficult for people to access already, and especially for a young person, I guess you're part of Generation Z, running for office. So I'm curious, what prompted you to run for office at first?
Well, I see this as a once in a generation moment, right? The challenges that we are addressing right now, that we are facing right now, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's an education system that's still failing too many young people, a democracy that's under attack, fundamental rights that are being repealed. These fights that are being fought right now are going to have generational impacts, and that we are going to be facing these impacts, facing these consequences for the rest of our lives. And I believe that as decisions are being made that will have impacts that will far outlive us, we deserve to have a seat at the table. You look at the gun violence epidemic. We are a generation that understands what it's like to sit in a classroom afraid of your school being the next to be a victim to the epidemic of gun violence. You look at the mental health crisis. We know what it's like to go to schools that are being overburdened by a crisis of mental health. You look at the climate crisis. by the time they say that by 2050, scientists say that by 2050, we're going to face the most catastrophic consequences of the climate crisis. Let me say that by 2050, I
Yeah.
will still be younger than the average legislator in Annapolis, right? So we bring a perspective that has been sorely missing and an urgency to take on a lot of these issues.
So, as a young person running for office, were you at all surprised at how many people were receptive to your campaign? Did it match your expectation, or was it kind of, I'm wondering because, I think a lot of the times people dismiss young people in politics, and I think young people often get, cast aside. But what was that experience like for you in talking to voters, meeting them where they are? Did you find that they were more supportive or receptive than you thought?
Well, at first, a lot of folks looked at our campaign and thought we were out of our minds, right? How there was the odds were so great,
Hmm.
and a lot of people counted us out. But me and my team and all of our volunteers, we worked hard.
Yeah, yeah,
We went out and knocked on those doors. We raised some money. We got our message out. We listened to voters. We did what we had to do to run a successful campaign, and we outperformed expectations. We defied the odds, and here I am today, right?
yeah.
And I think that's a testament not just to our ability to run an effective campaign, but also I come from Gaithersburg and Rockville. That's the district that I represent, right in the heart of Maryland. And folks there understand the importance of having different perspectives in our government, and they were excited about the message that we were offering and the new style of politics that we were bringing. And we built a coalition of folks of all ages, of all backgrounds, from all parts of the district, with support really coming in from all over the state and all over the country. And I'm just so grateful.
So I'm wondering, looking back on your campaign as a young person who ran for office and then won office, what do you think worked? And what advice would you give to other young people who might be thinking about running for office or going into politics kind of more generally?
I think authenticity is key, right? You need to be who you are. Really tell your story about why you are doing this work and why you are in this fight. I think the key is really bringing it back to the policies, right? What is it that you want to work on? What are the ideas that you have, and how are you going to turn those ideas into law? Right. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
we spent a lot of time on the campaign trail talking about specifics, right? Having conversations with real people about the challenges they face in our proposed solutions. And I think the key that what really brought us this victory was that before I did any talking, I did a whole lot of listening. Right, I
Mhm,
went all over
mhm.
the district, listening to people, asking them at their doors. Right, what is it that you care about? What is it
Yeah.
that is affecting you on a day-to-day basis? What is it? What are your hopes for the future? What do you want for your children? And their answers informed our policies and made me a better candidate. And I'm confident that they will now make me a better legislator.
I mean, listening is one of those skills that I wish more elected officials, candidates running for office would have. But we're seeing this right now with the Republican Party. I mean, this lack of listening, and if they were just to listen to young people and what we have to say, I think they would benefit a lot. But I mean, it seems like they aren't really listening or learning from their lessons. I want to ask you about Maryland because Maryland is one of those states that I think is really fascinating. It became a trifecta, meaning that both chambers of the state legislature, as well as the soon-to-be sworn-in governor Westmore, are all going to be Democratic. So I'm wondering what you think Maryland is going to try to do in that position now, and kind of acting as maybe the bulwark against some of the other Republican states who are trying to take away rights and make it harder for American, families and workers.
I'll talk about policy in just a second, but first, let me just say, uh, in terms of practice, right? Maryland will be an example of good governance and functioning democracy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's at a time when we need that more than ever, because so many people are looking at our system of governance, right, and seeing that it is broken, that it is not delivering. I think here in Maryland, we're going to prove that democracy still works, that democracy can still deliver for people.
yeah.
And it'll be a stark contrast from the dysfunction and division that we see in Washington D.C. Because here our focus really is on taking. We're going to take on these challenges that Maryland families are facing. We're going to come up with these solutions, and we're going to get them done. and Maryland families will be better off for it. So I'm just really excited for that to show that stark contrast. And look, on the policy front, I think we are going to be a laboratory for progressive policy. You look at some of the work that's already been done here in the state. We're leading the way on so many fronts. But this upcoming session, I'll give you a few previews. Right, number one, we're going to codify abortion rights in the Maryland Constitution, and we're going to make sure that Maryland is a safe haven for people seeking reproductive care from across the country. They can come here and seek that reproductive care and come here and seek protection from prosecution for seeking that reproductive care. Number two, we're going to respond to the Supreme Court's Bruin decision and make sure that our laws around handguns and really all guns generally are shored up. And that we continue protecting Marylanders from gun violence. We're going to continue to act on the climate crisis, advance policies that'll help us electrify and decarbonize and move towards our goals of full decarbonization. And then, a few other exciting policies. We're going to make sure that we fully implement paid family and medical leave, which was passed here last session. We're going to continue delivering for workers and working families with the child tax credit, for example. There are a lot of exciting things happening here, and I look forward to sharing them as the session goes on.
I mean, all of those are quite amazing. And I think it's another indication to, as we head into 2024, why those down ballot races matter so much. Because if there's one place that this isn't happening, it's in Washington, D.C., with Republicans controlling the House. But we have state legislatures across the country. Maryland is one of them. I know my home state, Illinois, recently passed this historic assault weapons ban that I think, like I said before, I mean, these legislatures really, really matter. And I think a lot of good things happen there that just don't happen in Washington. But I want to focus on your role in this new legislature. You're the youngest member of the Maryland State Legislature Assembly. Talk to us about what that means to you and what you hope your role is going to be in this new session.
I think there is, in addition to the constituents that I represent, the nearly 140 constituents in Gaithersburg and Rockville, I think I also have the opportunity to speak for an entire generation of young people who have been unrepresented in our politics. The average age of a legislator here is more than twice my own age. So there are a lot of issues, and I've mentioned a few of them already, right? Mental health in our schools, gun violence, education, student debt, the climate crisis, right? That we bring a unique perspective on, and we bring an urgency that I think has been in a lot of ways missing. So I am eager to collaborate and build consensus with a lot of my colleagues, while also bringing that perspective that I think is so important, and also making our democratic process, making our legislature more accessible and more transparent to young people. We've been very intentional about sharing what we've been doing here, sharing what this experience is like, what we're working on social media, right? On my Twitter, Joe Vogel, at Joe Vogel, my Instagram, Joe Vogel Maryland, right? We're going to continue showing people what it is that we're working on and what it's like to be in this legislature, because I think that ties back to my last question, right? My last answer. Which is that at a time when democracy, right, people's perception of democracy is that it's so broken, right? I want to show people that democracy here in Maryland, that government here in Maryland is an example of what we can be if we repair what is so broken in Washington, D.C.
I mean, it's so important, and we are all going to be watching what all the good that you're going to do in the Maryland State Legislature. And on a symbolic level, I think it's so important too, because across the country, you have Maxwell Frost on the federal level, you have you on the state and local level, and I think for Generation Z and seeing young people and kind of looking at their state legislatures, it's empowering to see someone in office and who can actually win. And so you serve such an important role and also have such an important voice in this. So Delegate Vogel, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you again, Victor.
Of course. Well, that was inspiring. I think Delegate Vogel is going to be a great addition of Maryland State Legislature, and we will all be watching what happens there because, like we said in the episode, I mean, these state legislatures are going to be so key in helping protect and pass meaningful legislation. And so I think some exciting things are happening there. And as we all heard from Delegate Vogel, Maryland, I think, is going to be one of those states that's taking the lead and taking the charge on a lot of those important issues. In the remaining time we have left, just a few news items of the day. The first is yesterday, I think very telling, and this is particularly relevant for Generation Z, especially after the Dobbs decision, where the Supreme Court struck down Roe. Yeah, 50-year-long precedent, and Republicans across the state, across the country, tried to restrict abortion access. And we saw, Generation Z respond in 2022 by electing more Democrats to the Senate and also preventing this red wave. But yesterday, we saw two anti-abortion bills get passed out of the House. Now, it's not going to go anywhere because it needs, going back to Schoolhouse Rock, it needs the Senate to approve it as well as the president's signature. But I think it's another indication of this Republican Party that isn't learning from any mistake that they made in the past. They aren't listening to young people. They aren't listening to what Americans care about. And instead, they're kind of doubling down on their efforts to restrict abortion, to make it harder for women to choose, for young people to have bodily autonomy. So I think it's a very, very concerning thing that we should all be paying attention to. Remember, this is their first policy vote that they have voted on, policy in loose quotes, but this is their first vote on any policy matter. And already we're seeing Republicans trying to make it harder for women to choose and trying to make it harder for reproductive rights and really kind of fanning the flame. So I think it's a very concerning thing that we should all be paying attention to. And that's what happened yesterday. This morning, we got some really good economic news from the Consumer Price Index report. We saw wages are up. We saw inflation is down for the 6th month in a row. And we also saw just unemployment continuing to go down as well as inflation going down. So I think we're seeing all of these things happening with our economy that's on it's not where we want it to be ideally, but there are some improvements, and we're seeing President Biden's economic plan, I think, really working right now. This, again, is kind of at stark contrast with the Republican Party, which introduced a bill that would help no one but the ultra rich. And so we're seeing these two realities play out. One party, the Democratic Party and President Biden, that's helping and delivering and really improving the lives of American families and American workers. And the other party, which is more intent on launching sham investigations and going into, to help the ultra rich. And so I think you're seeing these two really different parties right now. And today we saw some great news about how President Biden, what Democrats are doing, are starting to work. I think we're going to start to see that more in the months and weeks to come. And so, that's good news, I think, for all of us, and especially for American workers and American families. That is all the news I have for you today. We will be back tomorrow for another episode of On the Move with Kurt Bardello, who I know all of you have either seen on MSNBC or maybe follow on Twitter. He is such an important voice in this fight to preserve democracy and also just elect better candidates. So don't miss that tomorrow. It's going to be at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. We'll talk about this Republican mess, what Democrats are trying to do, what we can do better, and just kind of where we go forward from here. I think he's been one of those voices who has really stressed what Republicans are going to do once they take control. And now they're in control, and we're starting to see some of his predictions ring true. So tomorrow we have Kurt Bardello joining us, and the next week we have another packed week of On the Move. Don't miss it. We will be back tomorrow again at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification. I will see you all tomorrow, and have a great rest of your day.